When you look at what's unfolding in Ukraine, what do you recognise the tactics? Do you get a sense of what Putin's ultimate objective is at this time?
Yes, I think what we're seeing is we are involved in an information war. That much is clear. And what happens in an information war is essentially three things. First of all, there's a battle to control and own the narrative. Who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad, who's winning, who's losing. And you were talking earlier about how it can become very simplistic and polarized and not particularly sophisticated. There's also an attempt to sow doubt and confusion. And, we saw this most recently in Syria, and Russia successfully, I think, was able to create significant amount of confusion. And of course, when we're confused, we lose purpose, we lose the will to fight, we lose a common understanding. And then there's a longer term game, which is, what is important to us? What are we fighting for? What are our values? What do we stand for? Do we stand for freedom and democracy? Do we stand for speech? Do we want to defend ourselves? What do we want? What are the limits? So, I think, we find ourselves in this information war. It's very clear how it's playing out. And I think, we can look at events on the ground in the Ukraine over the last 2 weeks and see a very decisive set of narratives. There's a Ukraine narrative and there's a Russian narrative that is very, very different.
We hear a lot at the moment suggesting that the war is going badly for Vladimir Putin. Is that how you would read it, or are we misunderstanding in the West what he is actually about?
It's a very interesting question. If you look at the armoured thrust, then that appears to have gone very badly indeed. And you only have to look at some of the narratives that have evolved online and some of the websites and fact collectors. I think the Ukrainians have surprised the world in their ability to get real-time imagery of what's happening on the front line out to the world. So, there are websites where you can, and Twitter feeds where you can literally look at a fairly accurate breakdown of the number of armored vehicles that the Russians have lost. At the same time, we're hearing interesting narratives emerge. So, for example, we've heard a lot in the last week about captured Russian soldiers or killed Russian soldiers, mobile phones containing rather desperate and sad messages to their mothers. Dear Mama, I'm fighting in a war I don't understand. I'm scared. I'm a long way from home. So there is certainly an apparent narrative which seems to be reasonably effective about the slow progress of the armoured thrust. But of course, we all know very well that Putin has other weapons and the ability up his sleeve to create much, much, much more damage. So I don't think we should be lulled into some sense that this is over and done with. I think this is only the very, very start of a conflict that is both kinetic and on the ground, but importantly is an information war in which we are all involved. We are all part of this information war. Let's be under no illusion that this isn't an information war limited to a couple of distant countries. We are all part of this, and we are all playing a part in it.
Something I was struck by very, very early on. In recent years, we've heard a lot about how modern 21st century warfare is very different, a very different beast compared to the way wars were fought in the past. Cyber warfare and drones and actions carried out remotely and so on. But when I watched what Putin is doing in Ukraine, it does look as if the old reliance on tanks and planes and men on the ground is still very much to be taken seriously, however much you might hope for the effectiveness of cyber and drones.
And we don't know what his strategy is, and we don't really have a strong sense of the thinking that lay behind this initial phase over the last 2 weeks. Some people have suggested that Putin had been misled by his circle of advisors who may well be yes men and people who feel that they cannot speak truth to power. So it may have been a strategic miscalculation. But I think you have to have soldiers and you have to have armor to take ground and to hold ground. So that bit is important. The other thing I'd say is that information warfare, although it is new in its current manifestation, it is not a new thing. Athens and Sparta essentially were involved in a war of ideas. They had different ideas about how the world should be and different outlooks on life. During the Cold War is essentially a battle of ideas. We had a group of people, we had the West believing in freedom and democracy and capitalism and free markets and so on. We had a very different idea in the Soviet Union. So these battle of ideas aren't new. I think what has changed is that we are now all involved. So we all play a part. We all get involved in reading, understanding, commenting, having an opinion. And I would say, I was really interested in what you were discussing with Zubi and your panel earlier. I think what we need to do to understand this war and to play an appropriate part in this conflict, which we are all engaged with, is to be alert and to be alive to what is going on and to ask questions. And I think that is arguably what has happened over the last 2 weeks that makes this conflict different from anything that we've seen before. I think people are much more alert, are much more alive to the potential of these conflicting narratives, to fake news and to misinformation.
How complete a picture of what's happening in Ukraine should we, as the watching public, be entitled to expect at the moment? We do live in an era of where we expect instant gratification. We ask the question, we get the answer. It has only been a period of time to be counted in days or a couple of weeks. Are we being premature in hoping to understand what's going on?
It's a really good question because, of course, we all want to dig a little deeper, or we should all have the desire to dig a little deeper and try to make our own judgments. Now, that is very difficult. Now, I'm not suggesting that Russia Today or Sputnik News, these state-controlled media outlets, are a force for good in any way, shape or form. But for you and I not to be even able to have a look at their websites anymore does make things a little bit harder for us to get a full picture. I would like to be the judge of what I believe and decide, not hand that over to state authorities in this country or anywhere else. So I think we've got to be very, very careful.
That's excellent insight. Thank you, Justin. Thanks for making the time to be with us and for casting more light into what is otherwise a very foggy picture. So thank you, and we'll pick this up again in weeks to come, I'm quite sure.